Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video. And Dragonflight has officially been released to the wild. We have access to the pre-patch, access to new features, access to new talents, and class design moving forward into the eventual launch of the full version of the game. But in today's video, we've got something else that we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about things that are making players angry. It is causing disturbances, and it is causing grief upon logging in. And I'm very curious to see if you share these, but I have seen much sentiment towards these across social media and personally share these views as well moving into this Dragonflight pre-patch. Now, if you want to stay up to date with everything related to World of Warcraft and what is going on, so you're always ahead of the competition, do make sure to hit the subscribe button. I greatly appreciate it, as well as I'm working diligently to be an excellent resource for you to get the most accurate and up-to-date information on my long-term goal of getting to 100,000 subscribers. Now, the first thing that you're going to notice upon logging into Dragonflight is that your UI basically had the great sundering of Cataclysm applied to it. And much to the same as when Windows tries to give me an update, I kind of tend to avoid it because I don't know where it's going to jumble things around, and I really need to have important things in certain areas because for me there's two major components when it comes to the user interface or the HUD that you're looking at and interacting with the game. One of them is for players who have accessibility issues. This is somebody logging in who needs their UI in specific areas to be able to utilize it. They might have a physical condition that limits their ability to play if they don't have, certain parts of their UI in certain areas that they can recognize and be used to. And then also the competitive aspect of the UI, where a player needs specific information displayed in areas of the screen in order to play at their highest level of competition. And with the great sundering of the UI at the moment and a lot of problems that we're going to cover with it, it's really tough to satisfy those two because, World of Warcraft already had a pretty complex UI considering how much customization, add-ons that you could download and deal with. But just figuring out where all of the settings are, going into edit mode at first seems very simple, like, oh, I've got boxes I can slide around. The first major problem for a lot of players has been raid frames, being able to figure out how to enable them, being able to figure out how to get them to stay. It seems like right now, for at least a lot of players, including myself, we play with these boxes and click on these boxes or target to these boxes, and we're so used to seeing the boxes that when we only have the party frames on the side, which some players use, is probably no problem to those players, we can't get our UI for competitive reasons into the areas that we need. I've also noticed that my UI just will often reset. Like, I had customized this UI, but now it's different upon logging in, and then I have to click an extra setting in order to get my UI back to where it was. I remember last night I moved this frame up to the top left and this frame up to the top left, but now they're back here down to the bottom, completely reset. So there's a lot of bugs right now that really need to be worked through in order for players, for accessibility and competitive reasons, to be able to get their UI going. Now, of course, it is normal upon a patch release, expansion release, for your add-ons to kind of get broken for a bit, but at least having a setting and an easy access point to kind of go back to the old UI so that you could have your settings for accessibility and competition reasons just immediately ready to go, because obviously this is bugged and needs more time to be fixed. So not having that option to go back and be able to play with the competitive settings that you had always used is going to be causing a lot of frustration and a lot of grief for players. And I can see a lot of people on Twitter just like, they're all dizzy, try to figure out what's going on with the UI and where it's going, because sure, it's visually appealing. We've got cool animations. We've got new cast bars with new animations when you cancel them. Like, it looks very cool. But when it comes to the functionality and those two major components, which to me, it's affecting gameplay first as opposed to visuals of the game, is that it's causing a massive hindrance and honestly really needs to be addressed. Now, the second thing that is causing a lot of disturbance currently within the game is tuning. So now, obviously, I'm kind of on the side of the fence where pre-patches, I kind of like them just being wacky and wild and wavy inflatable arm flailing tube man, where it's like, whoa, what's going on? Everybody's doing crazy damage. They got all this kind of cool stuff. And I think that they approached it with that sentiment. And what I mean by that is that they didn't disable legendaries. You can still use legendaries. You can still use your covenant abilities. You can still use the conduits. But they did disable our set bonuses. So it's kind of like, you wanted it to be wacky, but disabled set bonuses. So some classes are really wacky, right? The ones that didn't need their set bonuses really to be wacky. And some classes just have a lot of like modifiers that are tuned to certain abilities. And I'm thinking specifically for PvP, but I've seen this from both PvE and PvP, especially from Raiders on Twitter, where it's like leaving in all of this stuff is creating a class that you're not going to play moving into the next expansion, right? You're kind of practicing, like, I've got like Kyrian on my druid here, and I'm not going to have that in 2 weeks. So I'm practicing things, and are they going to tune around me having these Shadowlands things in these 2 weeks? Or is it kind of just like, this is what it is? And if you're one of the specs that gets to be crazy during these 2 weeks, you're going to have a lot of fun. And if you're not one of the specs, too bad, I guess, because that is kind of the case right now, at least that I've experienced in PvP. And I can imagine it's the same in PvE for anybody that's in PvE mostly here in Mythic Plus or Rating. Let me know in the comments, like, are there specs that are just astronomically performing better than others? Because that's kind of the deal there. So while I appreciated the sentiment, it's kind of like if you were going to go full wacky, I feel like leaving in set bonuses so the classes that needed them in Shadowlands to kind of be competitive could utilize them. Because otherwise, like, a lot of these specs are kind of just left to the dust. I would have much rather maybe just disabled them at this point, because it's a lot to take in. You gotta be considering these conduit combinations, whether or not your conduits overlap with your now new and existing talents, so you can min-max them in a different way. And it's like, it was a lot of stuff thrown all at once for something that you're only really going to be able to customize and play for, a very short period of time during this pre-patch, where it's not really the highest point of competition to take into consideration. So it's just a lot on the plate. I know there's a lot of players, even myself, who do like a lot on the plate, like trying to figure out where all of this stuff goes. But then there's also a camp of players who's like this is really this is really a lot right now. So I'm curious to see your thoughts on it. Do you like that they've left in, half of the Shadowlands stuff, but then took out a little bit of the Shadowlands stuff because of tuning problems, I would imagine, but it still kind of has tuning problems even doing that. It's just now some specs are kind of bad. Let me know in the comments down below. And now finally, the third thing that is causing a lot of grief and disturbance, which is something I think that a lot of us we're going to start to predict here, is the introduction of ranked solo queue. This is really the first time that we're going to be able to jump onto ranked solo queue and queue it. And the number one first thing that comes to mind when you think of solo queue, right, it's toxicity. And right now, one thing that has been enabled is toxicity without really like evidence of proof, right? Because people are just leaving. So you can queue into a solo shuffle round, which is going to consist of 6 3v3 arena matches. You're going to play them through. They're kind of in hyperspeed due to a lot of other factors, but not really the point. The person who wins the most rounds of these 6 matches at the end gets a lot of rating. So if you lost 5 rounds, we're on the 6th round of this solo shuffle. Someone else has probably won 5, right? Because you've lost 5. They're very happy. They're going to get a lot of points. You can just leave on the 6th round when you're 0-5. And the person who went 5-0 gets nothing, and you, for leaving, lose nothing. All you're going to get is a little deserter icon that doesn't let you queue again, which is honestly kind of bad because the queue times are pretty brutal. I even tried going tank or healer, which, again, I've seen a lot of players really upset about tanks in the ranked solo queue thing, because we really didn't talk about it because nobody was really testing it because no one was making tanks in the beta, but tanks are a thing in this. They're going to have their own bracket. You're going to have to know how to play with them. I don't know whether or not I'm 100% on the side of the fence of it being a good or a bad thing, but the initial sentiment, because people don't like tanks. I think the main reason you don't like tanks is because of tank plus healer plus DPS. I actually think tank plus 2 DPS can be an interesting meta that's totally different than we've ever experienced for 3v3, but there's already just the initial kind of toxicity towards tanks in PvP, but it's a lot more aggressive when the tank is kind of your main support. But the queue times for this bracket are insanely long. I've seen some people sitting upwards of 40-minute queues. I was sitting 20 to 30-minute queues. Like, the queue times for this are brutal. You play through a couple rounds, and somebody leaves, and you get nothing. You can sit in there for over an hour and get nothing, and people are going to grief you. And, I mean, we're not going to get into the whole, like, people are toxic, right? Like, you join a solo queue. I just recently got rank 1 on a druid. I got a 1600 rated warlock on my team telling me everything I'm doing wrong, literally just listing everything that he thinks that I'm doing wrong in the party chat to me to try and get me to play better. It's kind of crazy. It's honestly made what I thought. I kind of predicted this, that it would make LFG empty. I'm a bit worried that I don't even know if you could get a 3v3 queue with a team and your partners to pop at the moment, because having access to this is just way easier, right? Way less friction. Don't have to go in there, don't have to look for people, don't have to talk to people. I just click the button. But the downside of that is that you're just going to get matched up with people that want to tell you how to play, tell you that this is wrong, that's blah, 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 blah. And then when you finally even get to the end of it, if you had a good run, they're just going to leave and you're not going to get any points. It's brutal, man. It's brutal. Like, something's got to be done about this. Something's got to be done about this, right? Because those three things that I covered, you got UI, so people are broken and probably not playing because they can't play with their UI because they don't want to lose, right? You don't want to just lose because you can't play because your UI is broken. The second one is the tuning. If you're some of the classes that are overtuned, you're having a great wacky time right now with all of these weird combinations of stuff. But if you're the other half of classes, and it does feel like it might even be half of classes that aren't in that wacky paradigm, you're kind of just suffering to the ones that are at the moment. You're just there to play victim for them to pick on. And then when you do finally get into some matches, you're going to be dealing with some toxicity and people abusing this, leaving ranked solo queue matches. Now, fortunately, this stuff is happening in a period of time where it's not like the highest level competition, right? There's no race to world first. There's no like competitive rewards that we're going for that are going to stay in the game for any prolonged period of time. But if this isn't addressed, like these are three very dangerous things that could be sucking the vitality away from what otherwise could be a very exciting and hype expansion that really need to be addressed. So I just wanted to talk about them in today's video. I do hope that you enjoyed the video. If you did, once again, hit the subscribe button, comment down below with your thoughts, and I will catch you in the next one.